Use some common sense. You're just a fake parent. I was speechless. Why did I have to hear something so cruel? John, the son of my husband, Mike, from a previous marriage, was recently accepted into a prestigious medical school. I had just decided to pay for his tuition and had returned from the bank. I was wearing the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony and showed it off to them. Their reactions were cold, Mike frowned, and John looked obviously displeased. I couldn't understand why. Being called a fake felt like a deep thorn piercing my heart. That's right. Fake parent shouldn't come to the ceremony. In my despair, I couldn't say a word back. Who could have predicted that the family I chose to love would so easily turn their backs on me? It couldn't be summed up with just one word like sad. Every day after that felt fated. On the day of the entrance ceremony, I didn't go. I left the suit in my room and went out. At that moment, my phone rang. The caller was Mike. "Hey, what's this all about? You liar." He was yelling furiously. Soon, the truth I didn't even know was revealed by the person next to him. My name is Emily. I'm a 51-year-old single woman. All my friends were married, and some already had children who were already grown up. Lately, I had been having more tea parties with friends who had free time after raising their kids. Listening to their stories made me smile or sometimes think it sounds tough. But everyone hasn't changed much. I think about this on my way back from tea parties. If I had a husband and children, how would I be spending my time now? Would I be reminiscing about the challenges and joys of raising kids, just like my friends? But not being married didn't bother me much. What I still thought about were my deceased parents. My father was ill from a young age. Despite the pain of treatment, he always smiled gently, like the sun. Even when bedridden, he continued his hobby of reading and would give me book recommendations. He passed away when I was around 30, and my mother and I cried together. After losing my father, I was in shock and became lethargic for a while. It seemed my mother was the same. After his death, she started forgetting things and the house became messy. She used to be a neat freak, but something had changed. With that in mind, I persuaded her to go to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with the onset of dementia. Living alone, I immediately moved back to my mother's house to take care of her. From then on, I spent my days facing my mother and her dementia. My mother started looking for the trash I threw away. She kept opening the front door, insisting someone had come, even though no one was there. Once, she even mourned a cat we never had, saying it had died. We spent 20 chaotic years, not understanding what was happening. And just recently, I lost my mother, too. Amidst the sense of loss, I finished the funeral and began sorting through her belongings. It wasn't something that could be done in a day or two, so I took my time, pausing occasionally. I opened the window and looked up at the sky. The clear winter sky mixed with the spring breeze. I wondered how long it had been since I last noticed the change of seasons. Maybe I've been too tense all this time. I sighed deeply and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. Just then, the doorbell rang. Through the intercom camera, I saw a woman who lived in the apartment. Before my parents passed away, I inherited an old apartment and have been the landlord since my 30s. As a result, I got along well with the tenants. They were all friendly and often shared some fruits and vegetables with me. The apartment was about a 10-minute walk from my parents' house. Since she made the effort to come, I wondered if there was some trouble. But that wasn't the case. She had heard about my mother's death and came to check on me out of concern. She was about the same age as my mother and was very close to her. I replied with a forced smile. "I'm fine. I knew this day would come eventually. But, you know, Emily, you seem a bit down lately." "Really, I'm okay. Your mother was so kind to me." "Was that so?" Her eyes were swollen from crying, showing how deeply she cared. After reminiscing for a while, we promised to visit my mother's grave together soon. Knowing there were people who cared for her like this would surely bring my mother peace. Suddenly, I remembered something. The apartment would have to be demolished in the near future. Just before my mother passed away, I received a letter from the city hall about a meeting. At the meeting, they explained that the area was slated for urban development, and the spot where the apartment stood would be turned into a road. So it's 5 years from now. I sipped my coffee and stared blankly at the calendar on the table. In these 5 years, the tenants would need to find their new homes, and I would have to find a contractor to demolish the apartment. The city would cover part of the cost if I applied for it. Still, it was hard to bring myself to demolish the building. Even though it was an old apartment, it held a lot of memories for me. There were many challenges, like frozen pipes, clogged toilets, and noise complaints. When I couldn't solve things myself, I managed with my parents' help or by consulting with contractors. I even spent days looking at paint samples for the exterior walls, another fond memory. I don't want to do it, but it still has to be demolished. The tenants would need time to find new places to live. I should make a notice soon. Losing my mother and now having to let go of the apartment is incredibly sad. To distract myself from these feelings, I quickly drank up my coffee. Then, I set aside the task of sorting through my mother's belongings and started working on the notice. The tenants visited me every day, one after another. They were all worried about me. The longer they had known my mother, the more they reminisced about her. Even those who hadn't known her well still came to talk to me. Recently, I often talked a lot with Mike Smith, who moved in about a year ago. He chose this apartment because the rent was cheaper than the surrounding area. He lived with his son and mentioned that education was expensive. "You've been through a lot, Emily." "Thanks, but it can't be helped." My mother is probably smiling in heaven now. "Wow, you're so strong." "I lost my wife a few years ago, and it was tough to recover." "Oh, really?" "Yes. She was sick, and it was an incurable disease." "Was she in the hospital?" "No, I took care of her at home." "It must have been hard, especially with your son." "I was taking care of my wife while I cooked, went to parent-teacher conferences at kids' school, stuff like that. It was hard work." His cheerful demeanor didn't show any signs of hardship. Perhaps that was part of his charm. His stories were always interesting and made me laugh. Talking with Mike made me forget about my grief over losing my mother and the sadness of having to demolish the apartment. Gradually, I realized I was attracted to him. Even when I went shopping, I found myself wondering what Mike liked to eat. Oh no. What am I thinking? I brushed my hand beside my face, trying not to think about it. In my 50s now, I should know my place. I kept telling myself this. But whenever I saw Mike, we had such enjoyable conversations that my resolve wavered. Over time, Mike and I grew closer. One sunny day, Mike came to me with a serious expression. He said he needed to talk, so I invited him inside. I wondered if he was going to tell me he was moving out soon because of the notice I had posted. Feeling a bit nervous, I sat across from him and he began to speak. "Actually, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "You seem so formal." "Well, I've liked you for a long time, Emily." Slowly, he pulled a small case from his pocket. As he opened the lid, he said to me, "Will you marry me?" Inside was a beautifully elegant ring, sparkling brightly. "What? Me?" I was so surprised I blinked several times. I thought it must be a mistake or a joke, but it wasn't. Mike leaned forward and said, "Emily, you're so calm yet so much fun to talk to. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. But I'm already 51. Age doesn't matter. I don't choose people based on that." Mike looked at me seriously and said this. "Marriage is about living together. I want you to be the person I share my life with." Mike. "But, maybe I'm not good enough. I have a grown-up child." "That's not true. I care about you too, Mike." And so, I accepted his proposal and we decided to get married. That night, I took a long shower, staring up at the ceiling. I never imagined that something like this would happen at this stage of my life. You never know what life will bring. As I looked at my flabby arms, I wondered if I could even fit into a wedding dress. While these thoughts occupied my mind for a few days, Mike came to me with some good news. His son, John, had been accepted into a prestigious medical school. Wow. Congratulations. Yes, it's such a relief. He was so stressed during the exams, and now we can finally relax. We should celebrate. How about we order some pizza? Well, there's a bit of a problem. What is it? Even though he got in, we can't afford the tuition and fees. Medical school is quite expensive.
Oh no.
We need to at least pay the entrance fee by the deadline. Seeing him so distressed, I couldn't help but feel troubled too. At this rate, John wouldn't be able to start medical school. If only I had been more prepared. Mike clenched his fists, frustration evident on his face. He wanted to become a doctor to help his mother when she got sick. I had no idea how much medical school would cost. While I couldn't cover all the expenses, I thought I might be able to manage the entrance fee. I can handle the entrance fee. Really? His face lit up immediately. Yes. After all, we're family now. Thank you. Thank you. Now John can become a great doctor. Don't cry. Let's support John together. I then found out the exact amount needed for the entrance fee and started preparing for the transfer. Actually, the city had deposited some money as compensation for the upcoming demolition of the apartment. I checked the balance on my bank app and told Mike and John that I could cover the entrance fee. That's great. Thank you, Emily. I mean, Mom. This is wonderful news. Alright, let's celebrate with that pizza. Congratulations on your acceptance, John. It looks delicious. Thank you. They eagerly reached for the pizza, eating it all up. Seeing them enjoy it so much made me feel like I was looking at my own son, and I felt incredibly happy. Thinking about starting a new life with these wonderful people made me feel much more positive. I was determined to do my best for this new family. The next day, I confirmed the payment details and went to the bank. There weren't many customers that day, and I was called quickly after taking a number. As I approached the counter, I noticed someone in the back. We made eye contact, and he gave me a slight nod. It was the branch manager, Steve. When he saw me, he stopped what he was doing and came over. Emily, it's been a while. How have you been? I'm doing well, thank you. I appreciate all your help before. Steve had been a great help with the inheritance of the apartment and other assets. We've known each other for about 20 years. He was incredibly supportive when my mother passed away, and I'll never forget his kindness. My late father always said Steve was smart and reliable. What brings you here today? I showed him a copy of my bank statement and the transfer form. Actually, I recently got engaged. I'm here to transfer the entrance fee for my fiancé's son. Wow, congratulations on that. I thought he was going to say, but he didn't. Instead, his expression clouded slightly as he looked at the transfer form and then at me with suspicion. Could we talk about this privately? Both the teller and I were puzzled, but I followed Steve. He led me to a small room in the back of the bank, the same place where we had discussed the inheritance. Steve stared at the transfer form and then asked me, "This is for a medical school, right? The son is aiming to become a doctor?" Yes, that's what I heard. May I ask how you came to decide to marry this person? Excuse me? I was momentarily taken aback but decided to tell the truth. I explained how after my mother's death, I started talking a lot with Mike, one of the tenants. How he had cared for his wife, who had a rare illness, while raising their son alone. His wife had passed away a few years ago, and now he lived with his son. He proposed to me, wanting to spend the rest of his life with me. Shortly after that, the issue of John's tuition came up. I felt determined to do my best for my new family. That's wonderful. But, this Mike. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Mike Smith. Mike Smith? Steve repeated the name softly and then tapped his finger on the desk in thought. The rhythmic sound filled the room. In less than a few seconds, he stopped and said, "Can I hold on to this transfer form?" But, why? Please, leave this matter to me. He smiled as he stood up. And then, opening the door of the small room, he gestured for me to leave, saying, "Please." Confused, I left the bank. On the way home, feeling incomprehensible, I thought of Steve. He seemed a bit troubled when he heard Mike's name. Why? But Steve is a trustworthy person. He has never let me down whenever he said, "Leave it to me." There's still plenty of time before the deadline, so it should be fine. I decided to leave everything to Steve. That night, I showed Mike and John the suit I had prepared for the entrance ceremony. It was a neat, white two-piece suit. What do you think? However, their reactions were cold. Did you buy it? Are you really coming? Mike frowned, and John looked clearly displeased. I didn't understand why. What? Is it not good? It's not just about being good or bad. Use some common sense. You're just a fake parent. My heart pounded. Being called a fake felt like a deep thorn piercing my heart. That's right, Emily. Fake parent shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony. Fake parent shouldn't come. I was speechless. Why did I have to hear something so cruel? Just as my mind was about to go blank, Mike sighed deeply. Enough. It's time to tell the truth. The truth? Why do you think we were so nice to you? It was for the money. For my entrance and tuition fees. No, that can't be. There's no other reason I'd marry someone like you. What do you mean? Was it all an act? Yes, it was. It took a while to get close to you, marry you when you were vulnerable. I wanted a younger, prettier stepmom. You're just an apartment landlord whose parents just died. I thought you had a lot of inheritance. I hoped you'd cover all the tuition fees. I'm disappointed. Just covering the entrance fee? How pathetic. There's a limit to how much I can spend. That's enough. The family charade is over. We're not in some spy comic. We're done pretending to be nice. They laughed loudly. I stood there in shock, not understanding what was so funny. In my despair, I couldn't say anything back. The white suit now felt like a symbol of my foolishness. Who would have predicted that the family I chose to love would so easily turn their backs on me? It couldn't be summed up with just one word like sad. Their laughter echoed in my ears, and I covered them to drown it out. After that day, they continued to ignore me as if I wasn't there. Even though I was there, they treated me as if I were invisible. This kind of life wore me out. Thinking about the future kept me awake at night, filled with anxiety and worry. Sleepless nights continued, and before I knew it, it was the day of the entrance ceremony. I didn't go to the ceremony that day and left the suit in my room. I wandered the streets, regretting my foolish decision. Why did I fall for their sweet talk? It was my fault for not doubting them. How should I deal with them from now on? These thoughts consumed me. Suddenly, someone tapped my shoulder and called my name. I turned around to see Steve standing there, smiling. I just happened to see you. What's going on? Well, there was no way I could tell him I had been deceived by my fiancé and his son. I looked away, feeling embarrassed. At that moment, my phone started ringing. The caller was Mike. Excuse me, I need to take this call. I excused myself to Steve and pressed the answer button. Mike was furious, shouting at me. Hey, what the hell is going on, you liar? What? At the registration desk, they told me your admission has been canceled because you haven't paid the $40,000 enrollment fee. That can't be. Explain it. Both of them were yelling on the other end. I was sure I went to the bank that day and handed the transfer form to Steve. While I was confused, Steve, who was standing next to me, extended a hand. Let me explain to him. He took my phone and put it on speaker. Hello, Mike. This is Steve. I am a banker near here. What? You were involved in an embezzlement scandal at your previous company, weren't you? Steve spoke calmly and clearly. What are you talking about? You fled here from your hometown. I was surprised to see you. Hey, don't talk nonsense about my dad. I wish it were nonsense. It was a huge scandal that involved our bank due to our dealings with that company. Stop it. It was hard to forget such a significant event. Steve's smile disappeared. Instead, with a very stern expression, he carefully chose his words as if recalling that time. I remember your name clearly. When Emily mentioned it, I was immediately suspicious. What the hell did you tell him, Emily? I heard that she married you. I must take my hat off to you for your energy to remarry so soon after you were divorced. Divorce? You said she died, but that was a lie too? She was not incurably ill, and her death from illness was a lie. He was divorced because of all the fuss. Shut up. Just pay the money soon. You probably approached kind-hearted Emily, pretending to be a hard-working man, trying to get money. Isn't that right? Shut up. Emily, don't believe a word he's saying. No, Mike, it's you who's lying. On the day I went to the bank, I realized I had forgotten something and went back. I bumped into Steve then. He asked me to hold off on the transfer, saying there was something suspicious about Mike. Since there was time before the deadline, I trusted Steve and left the money in my account. Mike and John had assumed I had transferred the money when I mentioned going to the bank. I never actually said I had completed the transfer. That night, after showing them the suit, I discovered their true nature and intentions. That's when I realized the true meaning behind Steve's request to wait for the transfer. Today, I was planning to go to the bank to confirm everything. Meeting Steve by chance was unexpected, but it clarified everything. I tried telling you many times. What are you talking about? But neither of you listened, so you didn't know the money wasn't transferred. They fell silent on the other end. Faced with the truth from both Steve and me, they had nothing left to say. A few seconds later, the call abruptly ended, and all I could hear was the bustle around me. After that day, Mike and I decided to divorce rather quickly. Mike must have realized that I had uncovered everything and knew about my financial situation, so he decided to cut ties. I never imagined that his carefree laughter was just a facade. He left my apartment and this town with John, as if fleeing. John had always been trouble, frequently getting into incidents even in high school. However, because his grades were good, the teachers turned a blind eye and didn't make a fuss about it. Looking at the empty room they left behind, I recalled those rumors. Can something like this really happen? It felt like a story from a novel or TV drama, something that could be either true or not true. Yet, he had the ability to get into a top medical school. I regretted that he couldn't use his intelligence for something better. I'm done with marriage. A few years later, my apartment was rebuilt in a different location. And it was only a few minutes' walk from where it originally was. On the day I posted a notice on the apartment, I also went to the city office to discuss relocation costs. During that visit, we discovered an error in the construction plans for the development project by chance. As a result, the development area was revised, and the apartment only needed to be moved slightly. This surprised and delighted both me and the other residents. Though the reconstruction took some time, it was completed sooner than expected. Taking the opportunity, we updated the plumbing and other facilities. I wondered if the residents would stay. As I observed, it seemed they intended to stay. Sorry for the trouble, but we'll stay a bit longer. The woman who mourned my mother's death and promised to visit the grave with me said this with a smile. Now, we visit the grave together once or twice a year and have meals together. Everyone moved into the new apartment smoothly, and the relocation process went well. With the development progressing, the surrounding area changed as well. The new road made it easier for delivery drivers, and they were pleased. It also became more convenient to visit the nearby grocery store, as the road was wider and easier to navigate. The atmosphere seemed to brighten a little. The greetings with the apartment residents remained unchanged. Everyone was still as friendly and pleasant as ever. You never know what life will bring. My small whisper melted into the clear blue sky.